The weather's getting nicer. Spring is in the air. So spring means lots of colors, the flowers are blooming. Today we want to do a sign where we've got a bunch of colors involved. We are using our template of the month for March of 2024, and we're using the fatty font, the 1-inch and 2-inch, which are super easy to carve and really go well with this spring themed sign. So we'll leave links in the description below for everything we're using. So let's get started.
So we started out with a piece of this blue pine that already has the edge on it. We used 2 lines on this sign. The bottom line is 1 inch and the top line is 2 inch. So he puts one of each letter in the middle of the board to kind of get an idea of where spacing is. Then what he's doing is he's marking where each line's going to be. The top line he used the square and the straight edge, and the bottom line he just used his finger on the edge of the board to get it where he wants. Now this template is kind of big, so it has to go at an angle for there to be enough room on this sign. Then what he's going to do is he's actually using the printout that we give with all of our fonts to make sure that he gets these letters in the right orientation, to make sure the N's aren't upside down or that even the H isn't upside down, because sometimes it's really hard to tell. Now what you'll notice is that Dad kind of laid his bottom line out to get a basic idea and get the measurements first. That's because the bottom line is longer. It's almost always the case that you want to center the rest of the wording on your sign off of the longest line of wording. Then Dad just sprayed it with his primer, being careful not to blow the letters all over the place. The first bit Dad's using is the profile bit at 1/4 of an inch deep. Now something to keep in mind when it comes to the depth is that if you have your bit sharpened at all, it's going to cut a little bit wider at that depth than a brand new bit. So it just kind of depends on your bit, how much it's used, how many times you've sharpened it, and all that. So just keep in mind the depth gauge is a really good way to start, but just start in a small area and really take a look at your depth before you go full bore with carving. Now on this template, some lines are thicker than others, like this one right here for example. Now Dad actually didn't go back and take out the rest of the wood in that line, he just left it almost kind of single line. Everybody has a different way of doing it, especially when it comes to artwork. It's open to so much different interpretation. That's what's so cool about hand carving the way we do, is because you could carve the same thing 100 different times and they would each look different. It's so much better than CNC. Again, that's just our opinion. Now with these little leaves right here, notice that Dad's actually carving outside of the line itself. Just because if he were to try to at that depth take all of that line out, then it would end up probably chipping out the small intersection. Once the template's done, then Dad's going around the outside of the large letters because these are going to be outset. Now you'll see as soon as this speeds up here that Dad's doing an initial carve and he's getting fairly close, but one thing that the editing doesn't always show is that we generally make multiple passes with our lines, mainly because we start a little bit farther away from the line unless it's something that really takes some intricate work, but we work our way into the line. It's so much easier to do that than to try to get it absolutely perfect the first time. Now Dad's dropping the profile bit down to a little bit over 1/4 of an inch deep, and he's going around all of the outset letters again. This is an extra step that I used to hate, but really it only took about, 3 minutes, and it's gonna make doing the cleanup around that with the 90-degree bit way faster and way easier, so it actually saves time.
Hey guys, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and click that little bell icon. We're trying to hit a goal of 100,000 subscribers. And by the way, in case you don't know, we really don't have paid sponsors. So if you can head over to their website, makeawoodsign.com, check out what we've got, see if anything's for you.
Now that Dad's got all of the outline of the Outset letters done, he's going to take our 90-degree bit at somewhere between 3/16 and 1/4 of an inch deep, and he's going to make the cloud around the letters, and then he's going to go back and take out all of the wood that's in the letters. Now with this, you really want to be careful because there's some tight areas, and you really want to make sure you don't nick your letters with this router bit, because you are going to be able to see it big time. So that's another big reason that doing that buffer zone, going a little bit deeper with the profile bit, really helps. Now Dad's got the 60-degree bit at 1/8 of an inch deep. Now this is a perfect example. Notice Dad tried it at 1/8 of an inch deep and it was way too shallow, so then he adjusted back down somewhere between 1/8 and 3/16 of an inch deep. So notice that he didn't just go crazy once he had his depth set and start carving. He tested it to make sure it's where he wanted, and then he had to adjust. Now the reason that I like the fatty font, other than how it looks, especially in this sort of sign, is that it is so much easier. The Clarendon lettering is pretty hard to carve inset, especially with the 60-degree bit, which is how we do it. But the fatty font, it looks really good, and it's a great font if you're just beginning. That way you can kind of get your hand at it a little bit, and it's much more forgiving. One step that's really overlooked, especially by me, I'm terrible at this, is brushing your carving out with a stiff bristle brush. That's going to get all the loose stuff out of there, and also little chips that are just barely hanging on. Once you spray it and sand it, that air pressure after you sand it off will blow those things out of there. So make sure you brush it out really well before you sand it. Now we're doing multiple colors on this, so Dad taped off the area that we're going to do purple, and then he sprayed everything black. And once that's done, he's going to take that tape off, and he's going to tape everything else off, and then spray the purple. Now the purple we're using is a matte finish, and you really need to be careful not to use anything gloss, semi-gloss, or satin, especially with pine. This is matte sweet fig. I know it looks like it says sweet pig, but it's not, it's sweet fig. And this does take a little bit longer to dry, but it sands off just as good. So again, when you're spraying different colors, make sure it's matte or flat finish, and you shouldn't have a problem. For the sanding operation, we used our 60 grit disc on the disc sander and 120 grit on the random orbital. And you can do all sorts of different things. If you want to work your way up to 1000 grit, you definitely can, but it's not really necessary. If you're going to use Sharpies to color your signs, which they definitely work, they don't hold up as good as paint, but they will hold up for a while depending on the weather, make sure that you put the Sharpie on before the clear. That's kind of big, because if you put it on after the clear, it smears right off. This is really handy if you're carving on site and people are waiting for signs. That way you still get the color, but you don't have to wait for paint to dry, and you can do it a little bit faster. Then we just put on a few coats of clear.
Super happy with the way this thing came out. I wasn't sure how that flower was going to carve, but I'm really happy with the way it came out. Super simple to carve. Remember guys, if you're going to use the spray colors, make sure it's matte or flat finish. If it's not, if it's semi-gloss or gloss, you're going to have some bleeding issues, especially on pine. And the Sharpies work great underneath your clear. So you put the Sharpies on first and then you put your clear on top. It really helps those colors pop. Again, like always, all of the supplies, everything we use will be in links in the description below. Hope you enjoyed it, guys. We'll see you on the next one. We love you. Bye-bye.